Today we are going to look at a positional masterpiece played by the legendary Grandmaster Bobby Fischer. The game took place in Buenos Aires in 1971 at the Candidates Chess Tournament. Fischer starts off with e4, and his opponent Grandmaster Petrosian responds with c5, signaling the Sicilian defense. Fischer captures on c6. Petrosian's pawn structure is now much weaker, but he has more central control. c4. Fischer is aiming to create an isolated pawn on d5 and thus further weaken Petrosian's pawn structure. And at this point, Petrosian should have played knight takes on d5. This move was better because it avoids further weaknesses in the pawn structure. Instead, he takes back with the pawn, and now Fischer is already much better. The isolated pawn will become even weaker as more pieces are traded off. Queen a4 check, good move. Looking to trade off the queens or misplace the bishop. Black's bishop belongs on b7, and if it is diverted to d7, then it will be misplaced and not as effective. If the queens are traded off, then we will rapidly enter the endgame, where Fischer's pawn structure is simply much better. Either way, Fischer stands to gain something, which shows you just how great of a player he is. Bishop c5, great idea. Fischer plans to trade off a piece that could challenge a knight on c5. He will then plant a knight on c5 to attack the very weak a-pawn. And here we have bishop to c8, which is the best move. Also possible would be to play a5. But then b5 in this variation is much worse because it allows Fischer to create a passed pawn very quickly. So this would not be a good move for Petrosian to play. Therefore he plays bishop to c8. And then we see f3. Now if Fischer tries to immediately create the passed pawn by playing a4 and b5, then he quickly loses his advantage. Yeah, Fischer has created a passed pawn, but it is on the a-file, which makes it very difficult to queen. There is another important chess lesson. If you are better in the endgame, do not hurry. Do not rush. It is often better to maximize your advantage before cashing in. If we cash in too early, then we can lose the advantage. By rushing ahead, Fischer would have traded off his really great knight on c5 and would have greatly improved his opponent's pawn structure by trading off the weak pawn on a6. The game would be about equal in this variation and would have most likely ended in a draw. Knight takes on d7. This move is paradoxical and shows the genius of Bobby Fischer. A good player knows how to place his pieces on really good squares, but a grandmaster knows when to trade off those pieces. Even though Petrosian's bishop is a really bad piece, it was defending the pawns. Also, Fischer is now able to get a rook to the 7th rank, so he essentially trades off one strategic plus for another, which is very important because in this position, Fischer is going to have a very difficult time making progress. So he essentially trades off one strategic plus, the knight, for a rook on the 7th rank in order to make progress in this position. Now here rook to d6 is forced to avoid losing the a6 pawn and also to keep the rook more active. Other possibilities would have been if rook d to a7 to defend that, then rook to c6, and black's pieces are just way too passive. So if h6 instead, then simply bishop takes the pawn, and if the rook were to take back, then we have a forced checkmate here in just a few moves. So instead of that, if maybe, what about g6 to give the king this escape square on g7, then simply rook to c6, and white is going to be able to win the pawn. The knight and the pawn are attacked, the knight's defended, and the rook takes a6. So therefore rook to d6 is played to keep the rook active and to try and avoid losing the a6 pawn. but this allows white to get a rook to the 7th rank. Now that Fischer's rooks and bishop are on their best squares, he seeks to improve his king and activate it. Fischer is improving his game in all the areas before cashing in. He is maximizing his advantage to its fullest before going in for the win. This is very important. When you get into the endgame and you're better, you don't want to rush ahead. You want to gradually improve your position before cashing in your advantage. And here simply trying to play king out to g4 and win the pawn, and Petrosian stops that with f5. So then white tries to go this way to attack the d-pawn, and at some point bring a rook over to attack it and win the pawn. So therefore d4. And here Petrosian did not like being squeezed and slowly losing the game. Therefore he activates the knight, but this allows Fischer's other rook to get to the 7th rank. And that proves to be decisive. Yeah, here Petrosian resigned, because both of the rooks are now on the 7th rank, and the knight is very far away. Yeah, either checkmate or a great loss of material will happen. If rook to c8, for example, then simply rook check and rook h7 with an unstoppable checkmate on the back rank. What an amazing game played by Fischer at the 1971 Candice Chess Tournament.